Hello, my name is Brian Kinney, and I'm a Striven ERP advisor, and welcome to our Human Resources lesson, where we will be discussing time tracking management. Topics today will include time and expense settings, time entries, timesheet submission, timesheets list, and timesheet approval. So with that, let's get started. To begin, let's view the time tracking settings within our company settings, and to get there, click the Company tab and choose Settings from the drop-down. Once in your settings, click the Accounting section, followed by AR, choose Sales Orders, and click Time and Expense Settings. The Time and Expense Settings is where you can configure how you track your time and expenses and whether you bill your time and expenses by default. There are several options located on this page, and we'll go through each one by one to best understand how you can configure your time and expense settings for your company. So the first checkbox is where you note whether or not you bill for time and expenses by default. And if the answer is yes, then you can toggle on this checkbox. If the answer is no, then you can simply keep it untoggled. Please note that when you toggle on the checkbox, you'll have a separate section that appears below called Billable Transfer Settings, which we'll talk about a little later on. Next, you can allow the selection of customer location when creating time entries. If you would like this to be available for users who are filling out their time entries, you can simply check on the box. Please note, as you check, there is a separate box that appears where you can require the customer location as long as you're allowing the tracking of customer location on time entries with this checkbox. You can also decide whether or not you want to only show active customers on your time entries. If this is checked off, then customers in separate statuses like deleted or lost will appear in your time entry list. So if you want to narrow down the list on time entries for users to only show active customers, you can toggle that box on. You can also choose whether or not you allow the users submitting time entries to select the item based on the item category. If you toggle this box on, then categories will appear in the items list for users to select from. Please note that if you allow this capability, then you can choose to transfer the item category in the Billable Transfer Settings below. In the next checkbox, you can choose to limit your time entries to specific time increments. And if you allow this, then you can choose the increment of time you would like to limit. And here the options are 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 60 minutes. If you would not like to limit time entries to specific time increments, however, you can simply uncheck the box. Next is where you enter your expected weekly number of hours. So if this is an 8-hour shift over 5 days, then this would be 40 hours. If you work 9 hours out of 5 days, then you can put 45 here. Whatever your expected weekly number of hours is, you can enter that number here so that it can be tracked on the timesheets and time entry calculations. The next section is required fields, and here you can decide what is required for time entries that are submitted by users. Here you can choose to require a task, and if you choose to require a task, you can require tasks for all time entries or only all billable time entries. Next, you can choose whether an item is required for non-billable time entries, and if you would like that to be the case, you can toggle that box on. You can also choose whether an order is required for time entries, and if the customer location is required for time entries. And once again, this option will only appear if you allow the selection of customer location when creating time entries in the above section. The next section is Billable Transfer Settings, and here you can choose what gets transferred over from time entries to timesheets. And here you can choose to transfer, and this would include the customer location, the time and expense notes that are entered by users submitting their time and or expenses, item descriptions, task subjects, task descriptions, or item categories. If you would like to allow any of these to be transferred over, you can simply check them on as needed. Once you've configured your time and expense settings, you can click the Save button to save all your changes. Now that we've configured our time and expense settings, let's next go through submitting a time entry. Time entries can be found by clicking the Create tool or the plus icon. By clicking the plus icon, you can choose Time Entry in the Employees section. This will bring users into the new time entry page. In here, users can enter the information to submit a time entry. Time entries, by default, are used for a single day's time entry. At the top, we can choose whether or not we want this time entry to be billable, and we can simply toggle on or toggle off to make it billable or not. By default, the employee's name will be whoever's adding the time entry, but you can erase and choose a different employee's name from the dropdown. Next, you can choose the date in which the time entry occurs. As you change the date, the green line on the right-hand side will change based on the date you select. And this gives users a preview of when the time will be added on their time entry. Next, we can choose our pay type, and whether this is a holiday pay, normal pay, or overtime pay. Then we have all the requirements and fields that we selected in our time and expense settings. For instance, here we required a customer and we're only showing active customers. So here I can choose to select one of my recently viewed customers, or I can type ahead to find a customer of my choosing. By choosing the customer, then the customer location option will drop down below, and if you've required this, you'll see a yellow asterisk to the right of the customer location name. To select a customer location, click the field and choose the appropriate location down below. Next, you can choose an item category to track for the item. Then, by adding the item category, only items within that category will appear in your drop-down list. Next, we can choose the order if we're tracking this, and if it's required, we must select it to add the time entry. If we have a task associated with the customer, we can choose that from the drop-down as well. And finally, we'll add our hours of time that we worked. And if we would like, we can also enter any notes about what was performed during the time we're tracking. On the right-hand side, you'll see any days where the employee has time off, as designated with the yellow statuses. And this will list how much time off they have during that day, and list the hours as well on the right-hand side. You'll also see the total hours previously entered down below, with a total listing how much time was previously entered by the user. Once you're ready, simply click Save and Close, and you'll be brought into a new timesheet. Timesheets are used to track time on a weekly basis. And since we added a new time entry, that time is tracked on the day we selected, and everything that we entered in the time entry, ranging from the customer, the location, the order number, and the notes, as well as the item information, are all carried over into the timesheet automatically for us. In the timesheet, we can continue adding hours, and you'll also note that the time off is also seen here on the timesheet. Timesheets can be used to track multiple different information related to customers and tasks throughout the course of a week. For instance, here, if we did work for another customer, we can choose the customer from the drop-down, and then enter how much time we worked for that customer on a specific day. Please note that if you haven't filled out the appropriate information that you've required in your time and expense settings, you'll be prompted to do so with the red outlines in the appropriate fields. Here we can choose the order and choose the item we would like to add. You'll also note that if you choose to save and resume later down at the bottom, you can always come back to the timesheet to enter new information as the week progresses. You'll also see filled out timesheet lines as indicated with the saved statuses below the pay types. And saved timesheet lines will be highlighted in yellow, as we can see here. To begin adding a new timesheet, you can click your image at the top of Striven and choose Timesheet from the drop-down. This will take you to the same list that we saw previously, and this will allow you to add brand new timesheets or continue to fill out your previously worked on timesheet. You can also go back in time to a previous week or go forward to the current or future week as well. When you're ready to submit your timesheet, simply scroll down to the bottom of the list and click Submit Weekly Timesheet. This will issue you a warning in which you can click OK or Cancel. If you click OK, then the timesheet will be submitted and it will not be available to edit. If you click Cancel, you can continue editing your timesheet before submitting. By clicking OK, your timesheet will be narrowed down to only the filled out lines as necessary, as the timesheet has been submitted. Depending on your permissions, your timesheet entry will either be automatically approved, as we can see at the top of the timesheet here, or it will go into a timesheet approval queue. The permission that is needed can be found in a user role within your Striven system. To find the permission, click Employees and Roles underneath Security. Here, we can click a user role that we would like to include this permission on. And here we can search for Timesheet. By clicking the magnifying glass on the right, this will narrow down our list for anything that matches the criteria that we've entered. The permission Timesheet Self-Approve will determine whether an employee's timesheets are automatically approved or whether they go into a timesheet approval queue. If they have the permission, meaning that the box is blue, then timesheets they submit will automatically approve. If they do not have the permission, meaning that the appropriate box is white, then their timesheets will go into the timesheet approval queue. The timesheet approval queue can be found underneath Employees, or you can click Approve underneath the Time Tracking section. Here we can see all the timesheets that need review and approval. The timesheet approval queue is a great place to review and approve timesheets for employees of your Striven system. To review timesheets that have been submitted, simply click the Week of hyperlink, and this will bring you to the timesheet where you can review all the information. Please note that since this employee does not have access to the permission Timesheet Self-Approve, the timesheet has the status Pending Approval, which means that it needs to be reviewed internally before it goes through. After reviewing the timesheet, there are several different tools you can use. One is to send back the timesheet to the user for them to edit appropriately. The secondary icon is to edit the timesheet. You can enter different hours, notes, associate an order, or a task as needed. You can also message the employee right from the list. Once you've reviewed and you're ready to approve, simply toggle the box and the timesheet will be highlighted in green. Then click Approve, and the timesheet will be approved and it will be removed from your list. Next, let's review the Timesheets list. To find the Timesheets list, click Employees and choose Timesheets underneath Time Tracking. Here we can see all the timesheets that have been submitted so far, as well as their statuses on the far right. We also have search filters to narrow down our list by employee, division, a week of the year, and the status, whether it's pending approval, approved, incomplete, or deleted. Columns here include the employee, the week that the timesheet was submitted for, the time entered, time off that appears during the timesheet week, and the total hours on the timesheet, followed by the status on the far right. We also have tools to edit the timesheet by clicking the pencil and pad icon, message the user by clicking the messages bubble, and if timesheets are in an incomplete status, we can also remove the timesheet as needed by clicking the trash can icon. We can also click on the employee's name to view information about the employee as needed. All of these tools will help you configure, create, and manage time entries and timesheets that have been submitted by users of your Striven system.